You're in the 06010 Focus Fantasy Focus.
Welcome into the Fantasy Focus Football Podcast on a hump day. Field and Mike and Stephania Bell. Quiet trade deadline is now behind us. Kind of anticlimactic, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I was all ready.
Everything in this show is like, okay, there's this much time left for this to happen.
Yeah.
These teams are making calls. Will anything happen?
Nothing happened. Obviously, there was a lot of speculation, but there wasn't as much speculation about players that were necessarily fantasy needle movers. Yesterday, the big name that really floated, and I understand before people tell me, like, yeah, Le'Veon Bell. The Le'Veon Bell train only, like, barely left the tracks. Like, it never really picked up the steam. The big name that was close to being on the move yesterday was Jets safety Jamaal Adams. That caused a lot of ripple effects, which is probably better suited for another podcast. But it seems like Joe Douglas, the GM, and head coach Adam Yates are going to have some awkward conversations, if they haven't had them already, with Jamaal Adams and Le'Veon Bell and other players that aren't named Sam Darnold on the Jets roster. Just one move was made yesterday, though, in total. It was Aqib Talib, who's on IR.
Yeah.
Going to Miami in exchange for actually Aqib Talib and a 5th-round pick in exchange for a 7th-round pick in 2022. Miami continues to stockpile some more future assets. So not a lot of news on the trade deadline front, but Daniel, there was plenty of news yesterday, at least one major piece of news in the world of NFL. So let's get right to it.
Rewind. Fantasy news
From the National Football League.
This is the instant replay.
32nd birthday for young Andy Dalton yesterday as a fellow 32-year-old. And what's weird is you start to ask yourself how old you are every once in a while. I've like 5 times I've had to ask people, like, how old am I again? Because the number 32 feels kind of insignificant. It becomes somewhat significant when you get benched on your birthday.
It was kind of mean.
Andy Dalton was benched on his birthday yesterday. The Bengals starting quarterback, of course. Well, he's not 0-8. The team is 0-8 so far this season. They're now on their bye, which means that that's a natural time for a team to sort of examine, hey, is it time to consider a quarterback change or other major lineup changes? And Zach Taylor, their head coach, has handed the keys over, at least for now, to Ryan Finley. This sounds a little bit goofy to even ask it because this is, arguably the worst team in football. But Mike, I mean, just from a fantasy standpoint, does this help, hurt, do nothing to the value of 3 guys who have kind of emerged of late for them? Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, and then most recently Alex Erickson. Like, is there any change here?
Not right now, because it's a very high volume offense, right? They're running a lot of plays. As Kyle and I were talking about last night at bowling, we had our season debut of bowling. He pointed out that they're the fastest pace. Is that right, Kyle? They're the fastest pace offense in the league.
The Bengals, yeah.
The Bengals. So there you go. So as long as they keep doing that, that'll be helpful. Also, if you look at someone like Auden Tate, for example, he actually ranks 15th at wide receiver in OFP. So essentially opportunity adjusted or expected fantasy points. But he's way below that line, like 32 points in terms of actual fantasy points, because so many balls thrown at him are off target. He's the highest off target rate among qualified wide receivers. So we just need Finley to be a little more accurate, just put it in the vicinity of the receivers a little more, and actually it could benefit them. And by the way, I was looking at his numbers from last season at NC State. He had one of the highest rates in terms of the percentage of his passes that went 5+ yards downfield. So not one of the lowest in terms of throwing it behind the line of scrimmage. He pushed the ball down the field. That could be scheme, certainly, but it could be in his nature as well. So there is some reason here for optimism that maybe the offense is a little more efficient.
Well, and by the way, week 10 could see the return of A.J. Green.
Yeah.
So that's like a gift to you if you're coming in new as
That
a quarterback.
Stephania, I don't like to put you on the spot in this regard because I know that you are you always err on the side of complete picture of information, but that seemed like a suggestion to me. Like, are you counting on A.J. Green in week 10? Are you expecting? Are you thinking
I think he has
50,
said that
50
he
or better?
was kind of targeting week 10.
Okay, that's
so
good.
when it comes, A.J. Green he doesn't fool around. He's a straight shooter.
Yeah.
I think he's been straightforward before. When he told reporters, like, I don't know where you got the 6-week thing, that wasn't me. I always thought it would take longer. I think he was being honest. I think he's been, when he has told reporters, this is what I'm working on, but I'm not there yet, he's been honest. And so when he said he was kind of looking at week 10 and not really thinking about going anywhere, because there was some chatter about whether he'd be moved out of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm got my focus on this. And I think if everything feels good to him and there's no change, there's no setback, that could be the first time that we see him.
Well, we look to see what happens with Ryan Finley. They are on their bye this week, so he makes his debut in week 10 against the Ravens, and hopefully he has A.J. Green along with him. Now, Mike does something. He does a lot of things at ESPN, but one of the stats that he has sort of, I would say, is this proprietary or no? OFP?
Yeah.
Proprietary stat from good old Mike Clay. I don't have any proprietary stats myself, but Mike has one. It's called OFP. It stands for Opportunity for Fantasy Points, and it's basically based off how much you were used in your respective role in a game, how many fantasy points you would expect that player to get.
Mm-hmm.
The overachiever last week, Mike, was a guy who had, I believe, 4 touchdowns total. Was it 4 for Tevin Coleman?
Yes.
3,
Yes, it was.
4 total touchdowns.
Pretty good.
For Tevin Coleman, 38 fantasy points. But you're cautioning us just a little bit based off what you saw in week 8. I know, be careful,
Sorry,
Stephania.
Stephania.
She might bite.
Sorry. Listen, 38 fantasy points. His expected total was 13. I mean, it was a huge gap, the largest in the league last week. But here, look, I'm going to say a lot of positive things nonetheless, okay? He is
like to
fantasy.
hear them.
Right, yeah. I know. You're going to enjoy this. The number 6 scoring fantasy running back since he returned from injury 4 weeks ago.
Like that.
Over 300 rushing yards, 6 total touchdowns. 16.25 carries per game. You like that. What you don't like, though, is he's only played half of the snaps since he's been back, and he only has 8 targets during that span
He only
as well.
needs half the snaps. Wouldn't it be kind of rude if he played all the snaps and
That
then
would be a
scored
lot.
so many more points?
Not if you had him on your fantasy roster. It certainly would not. I think he only played 33% on Sunday. Part of that was the score.
He's efficient. Where's your efficiency stat?
Well, efficient. You chase volume, not efficiency,
Okay.
Stephania. Not touchdowns, certainly. A little over his head in the touchdowns so far is OTD is 4.2. He's at 6 touchdowns. He scored on 7% of his rushes, which is second highest among running backs. But again, he's averaging a finish rate around 15, 16 so far. So I still think he's an RB2. And they play Arizona this week. You like that matchup. We loved the matchup last week, too. He's the guy we highlighted on our DFS podcast. I mean, he was underpriced, had a great matchup, and he delivered the goods. But again, things can swing based on the matchup week in and week out.
Well, they play the Cardinals tomorrow night. A full preview of this game on the show at that time. Mike and Stefan, you can hash out their differences up until that point. The underachiever last week, Mike, is a player that I imagine probably regularly does not reach his OFP because of his quarterback. Titans wide receiver Corey Davis had 3 total fantasy points, much to the chagrin of, well, me. You expected much more based off of the looks he got last week.
Yes, I'm still getting replies to the video we posted on social last week that said Corey Davis could be a consistent fantasy asset. Now, we were very positive about that, and we got let down. That was the biggest letdown of the week.
I have a question. Were the how were the replies? Were they
all
nice?
positive,
Were they
all good
supportive?
try. We
Yeah.
still support you.
Good job,
it was
good
all
effort.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was none of that. Anyway, Corey Davis only 3 fantasy points. His expected total was 12. Very disappointing. After coming off the good week with Ryan Tannehill, season high in targets, we thought Tannehill just would have this ability to get him the ball. And he had a great matchup on top of everything against Tampa Bay. He had 2 catches, 9 yards, no touchdowns on 6 targets in the game. In fact, this is unreal. The Titans wide receivers had 62 yards on 10 catches in that game. Coming into the game, the Bucs were allowing 203.8 yards to wide receivers per game. That was highest in the NFL, which is all around disappointing. As for Corey Davis going forward, look, he only has 2 top 10 weeks so far this season. He's been 50th or worse in the other 6 games. I view him as a wide receiver 4 against Carolina. There's still hope, right? He could have had a dud. They switched coverage around in Tampa Bay last week a little bit, moving Hargraves inside. Maybe that threw them off. There's still some hope. He could be on your bench, but I'm nervous starting him right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's been the story of the last 4 years for Corey Davis.
Yeah.
3 years, 4 years, however long he's been in the league, that has been the story with Corey Davis. So much promise, and yet too much disappointment. Mike, tell us about ADT before we get into your Fantasy 32. Another one of your fantasy articles you write each week.
All right, let's do it. The Fantasy Focused Football Podcast is brought to you by ADT. What does real protection mean for our listeners? You can get all of the latest innovation in smart home technology from ADT combined with 24/7 monitoring from the most trusted name in home security. You get a team of professionals designing and installing a secure smart home just for you and your family. You get 18,000 employees safeguarding you with connection to first responders. You get the nation's #1 smart home security provider. You can get a secure smart home with everything from video doorbells, indoor and outdoor cameras, smart locks, and lights controlled from the ADT app or the sound of your voice. You can get professionally monitored carbon monoxide and smoke detectors. You can get a system custom designed to fit your home. You can get safety on the go in the car or when your kids are at school with the ADT Go app with an SOS button.
Thank you, Mike. Time now for the Fantasy 32 portion of the show. And we talked about this on Monday. David Montgomery, maybe, possibly, perhaps, turned the corner after a breakout game. But, Mike, do you think that was a sign of things to come? Or do you think we'll look back on the 2019 season and say to ourselves, remember that one game where David Montgomery actually looked like the player that we were supposed to get when we drafted him in the top 3 rounds, but actually didn't didn't provide us with the other 16 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think there's room for optimism. And I think I expressed that last week because we had that one game where he just had whatever it was, the 2 carries. But before that, he was actually getting decent volume. The efficiency just wasn't there. So there was reason for optimism, and we saw it. In week 7, the Bears called 56 passes and 7 runs. Week 8, 41 passes and 36 runs. So I think Matt Nagy was being honest that they were going to run the ball and then some on top of that. Career day for Montgomery, 27 carries, 5 targets in the game at almost 150 scrimmage yards, scored a touchdown. That's what we want to see going forward. You're not going to get 27 carries and 5 targets, but certainly
they should be able to game script wise keep him on target for 20 plus touches in a game. Like they're too good defensively. They're only allowing, I think, 17 plus points per game. Like they are one of the best defenses in football, even if they have not been as dominant statistically as they were last season, that they should be able to run David Montgomery. Combined touches should be somewhere around 20 each week.
And I think he can. And that would align with since week 2. His usage since week 2, and he was promoted 15.3 carries and 3.5 targets per game. So they don't have to change much in terms of him being on the field. He's played 73% of the snaps on Sunday. That all being said, this week they play the Eagles, who've allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to running backs. It is a tougher matchup than usual. Makes him a little shakier as an RB2, but he's certainly trending the right direction.
Stephania, I know we don't like to do things like grading trades a minute they happen, but now that we're about a week into the Emmanuel Sanders trade, how might you assess that deal?
I think a few minutes into the game when he scored that 4-yard touchdown catch, I graded it as an A.
Okay.
I mean, like
completely objective opinion, right?
Completely objective, but he led the team in targets in his very first game, which isn't saying a ton. Obviously, we've talked so many times about how San Francisco is the run heaviest offense in the league, and they obviously turn to that run game because, that player we just talked about, Tevin Coleman, he carried a lot of the workload for the rest of that game.
True.
But I think that was important for them to establish that quick connection. Sanders was only there for a few days, and all of a sudden he's in the offense. And Kyle Shanahan had said before the game that he was going to play a lot. I don't think he ended up playing as much volume as Kyle Shanahan indicated he would, but he got involved quickly. He and Garoppolo connected, and I think that's a good sign for things to come. They're still going to spread the ball around, but they had Marquise Goodwin absent because of a personal matter last week. They get Marquise Goodwin back for Thursday, so it'll be interesting to see how that changes things up.
He's a quick study. Mike, what did you learn about Emmanuel Sanders on Sunday?
Yeah, I think it kind of seemed like he didn't play a lot because they were so far ahead and doing so much damage on the ground. Like you said, he played 83% of the snaps. The problem is they only ran 22 pass plays, right?
Right. He was on the field, but not necessarily involved.
Exactly, because he didn't need to be there. They love running the football, and that's kind of a concern for me going forward with his value. And we talked about that last week, right? They're the run-heaviest team in the NFL. That's why they only threw 22 passes in this game, and I'm a little nervous about that. But the good news is we were hoping for a like I had him projected for a 23% target share. He had 5 targets in this game, 22.7% target share. That's perfect. Like as long as we get that going forward, right in that range, he can give you wide receiver 3 numbers. So that's good news for sure.
All right, Emmanuel Sanders remains kind of in that flex consideration. Then DK Metcalf, Mike, same division. Stephania keeps calling his touchdowns, and he had 2 more last week.
Basically the same pattern.
Yeah.
That was a short one, though. He had it was like right into the end zone.
So he also had a catch that would have been a touchdown that he just barely missed, although I think he ended up scoring
like
on
2
that
plays
drive.
later. Yeah.
So not necessarily like a touchdown he was robbed
I got
of.
a name drop for a moment because this was funny. Because we watched the games here on Sunday, and I know Field, you're there. I don't know if you were still there in the room. Randy Moss was described. We were talking about DK Metcalf missing that catch, and he's like, he's too big. His biceps are too big. His muscles are too big.
Too big.
We were describing that he was so, and I was sitting, Teddy Bruschi and Randy Moss were saying, like, he's so physically, like, built.
Yeah.
He couldn't ball just
The old
bounced
Ricky
off his
Williams issue,
muscles.
right?
Yeah.
Ricky Williams used to fumble because his biceps were so huge he had to start wearing sleeves. DK Metcalf, though, Mike, the good news is he did score 2 touchdowns last week. I think some people are wondering because you are the king of regression.
Mm-hmm.
Is this bound to stop, or are there some encouraging signs?
Oh, there's an encouraging sign for sure, and that is the fact that he has 13 end zone targets this season. That is number 1 in the NFL. He's on his own. He's clearly number 1 in the league in end zone targets. Actually, he could have more than 4 touchdowns right now based on that usage. I mean, if you're getting thrown at the ball near the goal line that often, you probably have 6, maybe 7 touchdowns. So definitely optimism going forward. You know, you might look at his stat line and see the 2 touchdowns, and that's fine. But then you see 3 catches for 13 yards, and that could obviously cause some concern moving forward. But there's a lot of positives here. He played 91% of the snaps. He's a full-time player out there with Tyler Lockett. He's reached 5 targets for the 3rd straight game and the 6th time in 8 games this season. He's reached 53 yards in 5 of his 8 games. He's 30th among receivers in fantasy points. And as mentioned, with the usage near the goal line, he's going to be a great candidate to score each and every week. Maybe the best candidate based on the way he's being used near the goal line. Or not the best because of his target volume, but in terms of the percentage of his balls coming to him near the goal line. So plenty of room for optimism here. If you have him on your roster, he's a fine receiver 3 or flex.
Doesn't it feel like the wide receivers in Seattle sort of fill the roles they're supposed to fill?
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Lockett, small and fast, he goes down the field.
But
DK Metcalf, large, goes. He's an effective red zone player.
Right. And the thing is, what's more impressive, there's 2 things. One is, you know what role they're supposed to fill, and yet they execute
Can't stop
it.
them.
You can't stop them. Number 2, I was going to say, now I'm no Mike Clay, but wasn't Tyler Lockett the one who was getting all the touch? I mean, I feel like they've shifted Tyler Lockett, and basically DK Metcalf has that role now. Because Tyler Metcalf, wouldn't that be
That would
interesting?
be a heck of a combo. Yeah.
But Tyler Lockett was his efficiency in terms of touchdowns. That was him last year.
Yeah, and we expected that. I mean, we expected his touchdown rate was off the charts. We fully expected that. And you've seen regression to the mean from Lockett in terms of yards per target, touchdown rate. His catch rate's actually higher than last year, which is unbelievable. But we've also seen his average depth of target closer to the line of scrimmage because
Playing
they have to replace
role.
Doug Baldwin, right?
Exactly.
So he's playing more. He's seeing more of those routes. Metcalf stealing more of the downfield work, and it's working fine for both. I mean, Metcalf's trending up, and Lockett's a great fantasy starter.
Still, they run into the San Francisco defense on Monday Night Football, November 11th. I'm a company woman.
Daniel, being a company man, has a question.
I do just have a question about it because we were just talking about Tyler Lockett back here behind the glass. And I just want to look at like week 4 on, like 4 targets for Tyler Lockett. 4 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets. Like he's not a heavily targeted guy. Eventually, we were talking about this last year, like that catch rate is going to have to fall off. Like, is there any nervousness at all about when he is not crazy efficient catching the football because he's not getting a ton of targets in that passing game?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm starting to wonder, like, why even doubt that the efficiency would tailor off?
Like he's just going to be this guy that has a.
Have you seen him catch the ball on his tippy toes?
I have.
Like, I mean, he's amazing. I don't
amazing.
think that, especially because now we're seeing it 2 seasons in a row. So I don't feel like it automatically has to fall off.
So he's like
even
the
if
Mark Price of wide receivers when it comes to free throw shooters, is what you're saying.
Well,
Is it Mike Price or Mark Price? You said Mike.
Mark. I said Mark.
Oh, you said Mark. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought I heard Mike. Mark Price gets stroked.
you were looking at me. I get it.
Is that what it is?
Honest mistake. But look, even if you regress that number a little bit, like I'm sure my projection for him probably is like a 78% catch rate or something, which is a little lower, but still, that's still going to be plenty. I mean, it's still extremely high for a player, playing the wide receiver position. So I'm not too worried about it. He's getting 6 or 7 targets a game. You have Russell Wilson, who is just unbelievably good at getting the ball to the open receiver. I'm not too worried about that.
Not too worried about that. All right. Not too worried about the player we'll talk about in just a moment. Some call him the GOAT, and I agree with them. But first, a word from the Fantasy Show.
So last week I got into a bit of a feud with the Arizona Cardinals Twitter account. You see, after a game in which David Johnson left early and then Chase Edmonds came into the game and dominated, after the game was over, the official Arizona Cardinals Twitter handle mocked fantasy managers for not being smart enough to start Chase Edmonds in fantasy. And well, I responded to them. Should have started Chase Edmonds in fantasy. Screw you. Arizona Cardinals Twitter handle should have started Chase Edmonds. No crap. Obviously, you think? So I got a little heated. But in hopes of bearing the hatchet, I have now invited the official Cardinals Twitter account here today. Secret Squirrel, have you seen the Cardinals Twitter account anywhere?
I have. His name is a little red, and he's nesting right here in my beard.
Hey, Matthew Berry, supposed fantasy expert. You know Daniel Jones is the #1 quarterback in fantasy this week. You should have started Daniel Jones.
Yes, thank you, Little Red. After the game, it is very clear we should have started Daniel Jones. Very helpful advice, Little Red. But you know what? Daniel Jones isn't even on the Cardinals. How did Chase Edmonds do this week?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Smooth exit there, Little Red. The Cardinals offense, an offense we had so much hope for this year, is now bordering on fantasy disaster. Unless our new friend Little Red can tell us exactly who we should be starting in that lineup with his fantasy expertise. Before the games. Tell us before the games, Little Red, where are you? Come on out, Little Red. Where are you, Little Red? Huh? Who should we start?
Maybe you should start.
Speak up.
The guy who's...
Speak up.
You're bald.
What? Oh, Little Red, no, I don't know.
Fantasy, you're in the 06010. Focus. Fantasy, focus.
Yes, they do, Stephania Bell. And while it may not be the most savory slate of games for Week 9, we do have one matchup that everybody is especially looking forward to. It is the Patriots going to Baltimore to play the Ravens, coming off of their bye. Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady. Opposite teams, their two squads looking to continue to improve their playoff standing in the AFC. And Tom Brady is coming off of an okay fantasy day, actually, because it was really, really crappy weather this past Sunday when the Patriots played the Browns. But Brady had a couple of touchdown passes and a more effective game in the rain than I maybe would have expected based off how treacherous the weather was. Now he plays the Baltimore Ravens. We all have him as a top 10 option this week. Mike, for a long time, when you think of the Ravens defense, you think of one that has the potential to shut you down. The Ravens defense this year, particularly against notable competition, has really not been able to slow many people down. Could Brady be in for a monster day on Sunday?
I don't know about that, just because, you mentioned their defense. They obviously just made some additions. Jimmy Smith's back from injury. They bring in Marcus Peters as well. Yeah. So suddenly that foursome there at corner is really tremendous, and they should be able to match up with all of these wide receivers for New England. They've been mid-pack against quarterbacks already this season, but believe it or not, only one top 12 week allowed. That kind of surprised me. They've allowed the 8th most yards, but this only 7 passing touchdowns. So that's kind of...
I think some of it's context. And again, Patriots defense too, right? Not like they've faced a bunch of barn burners, but the Ravens have faced one really, really good quarterback this year. That's Patrick Mahomes, who was able to have his way. I feel like they have been facing... Maybe I'm just wrong. I feel like I followed this on...
They play Seattle too.
Oh, that's right. They had a good day against Russ. I take that back. You're right. Totally fair. I missed the boat there on Russ, who did not have a great day against them. But they've also... it has not been a murderer's row of quarterbacks. That being said, you think Tom Brady has a chance to get on track against these Ravens?
I think, he's QB6 this season, so he's been pretty good. And there's a couple of things. And 4 top 7 weeks, so obviously we've seen the upside from him. But the thing I like the most about Brady this season as opposed to last year, think about this point last year. Yeah. We were really concerned because they were running the ball so much. Right. There was no fantasy value. They're the second pass-heaviest offense in the NFL if you adjust for game script. They are throwing the ball a ton. Brady is top 5 in dropbacks, pass attempts, completions, and yards. So my only point with the Ravens is that they're not like a pushover defense. They've been kind of like okay against quarterbacks, and they
Middle of the
add
pack, yep.
2 really good corners to the mix. I mean, it could potentially be a trouble spot, but I have him at QB9 with 4 teams on a bye. I think he is a borderline starter.
Yep, and the Patriots should be better offensively this week with Mohamed Sanu actually having a full week to get ready, and the fact that it's not going to be, as far as I know, sideways rain on Sunday night in Baltimore. All of those things tend to bode well for both sides. Really looking forward to this matchup. Now, Mike, you came within a hair of a Call of Shame nomination last week, but Melvin Gordon bailed you out. Before we talk about his Week 9 outlook, tell the people.
I'm so disappointed about that.
It was close.
It was really close.
It looked like a Call of Fame early.
Yeah.
You've gotten the end zone early.
Yeah.
Yeah, Melvin Gordon bailed you out just barely.
All right, seeing as how Melvin Gordon bailed you out, Mike, I'm going to read this live read. Is that okay with you?
Oh, yeah, that was for Daniel. Sorry.
That's all right. That's okay. We talk QB1s, we talk RB1s, we talk wide receiver ones, all kind of ones on this podcast. Stephania Bell ones. Every show with a true number 1 in my bathroom routine is Dollar Shave Club. Their fantasy formula is simple. Develop, craft, refine, everything, and only make products that are of the highest quality. They have everything that I need for an amazing shave. And you can tell. Because the Executive Razor is solid, weighty, it feels good in your hands. You know what I mean? It's not some flimsy piece of plastic. I hate using a gunked up razor. What about you, Stephania? It's the worst. Shaving cream, hair, skin, who knows what's getting stuck in there. It's gross. That's why I love using their shave butter. It's like putting angel tears across my skin. Oh my gosh, it's so incredible. Specifically formulated to be lightweight. It's like a hot knife through butter. Plus, it's full of vitamins on all of the areas that I'm placing that Dollar Shave Club shave butter. Keeps my skin healthy and hydrated. As a Dollar Shave Club member, I never have to waste time at a store wondering if what I'm getting is any good. Because I know what I'm getting is the highest quality. Because afterwards, when I feel that area that I just shaved, Stephania, it is so smooth.
Why are you calling me out in this?
Because I asked you a question, you didn't respond. I was just going to keep asking you until you eventually were a part of the live read. Dollar Shave Club isn't some sleeper. No, it's a keeper like our Mike Clay. Put their quality to the test. Their ultimate shave starter set has basically everything you need for an amazing shave. The Executive Razor. I just call it the X, if you know what I'm saying. The shave butter, prep scrub, and post-shave dew. The best part is you can try it for just $5. And after that, the restock box ships regular size products at regular prices. Get your ultimate starter set for just $5 at dollarshaveclub.com/FFF. That's dollarshaveclub.com/FFF. And you can be just like me, smooth in all the right places.
The way you read that live read is just, it's an experience.
It's award-winning.
It really is.
Really.
It really is an experience to hear you
start
read.
bringing me into
You
it.
should see what the experience is like when I'm shaving in the morning.
No.
Okay, Daniel, I'd rather not. Let's move along to Melvin Gordon, who, as we just mentioned, Mike nearly made his way into the Hall of Shame over him.
The Call of Shame.
Call of Shame, excuse me. Melvin Gordon faces the Packers on Sunday, and the encouraging signs for Melvin Gordon is that since he returned to the field of play, they own a 44-16 carry edge over Austin Eckler. So he has become the clear-cut workhorse back out of the backfield. Now, the Chargers fired offensive coordinator Ken Wisenhunt on Monday night during the Dolphins and Steelers game. I saw a note from Jim Trotter of the NFL Network, our former colleague here at ESPN, who's well tapped into all over the NFL, but also the Chargers.
Especially the Chargers.
Mm-hmm. And a tweet to the effect of basically the team wanted more balance. Anthony Lynn wanted more balance on the offense, whereas Ken Wisenhunt was a little bit more dedicated to throwing the football, airing it out, sort of the Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit. Do we think that with the more balanced approach in mind, Melvin Gordon's value might actually rise going forward now, Mike?
I think it could. I mean, he's averaging 2.5 yards per carry. He's talented, right? He's a good football player. He's a good running back. We've seen that on display for many years in the NFL. There's a reason he was drafted in the first round. His talent level does not suggest 2.5 yards per carry. And I know the offensive line is a huge part of that. You need to kind of hope that that's going to be a little bit more improved going forward. Who knows if that's going to happen, but maybe they could find ways to open lanes with the coordinator change here. And keep in mind, despite what feels like a disastrous month with him in this offense. His last 2 fantasy finishes, RB20, RB24.
Which is more
Not
a
that
reflection
bad.
of the fact that, like, it takes very little to actually be a top 25 running back in
But
a
still,
given
that's,
week.
I mean,
I know.
if you're
A lot of guys
but
are
he's
disappointing.
ahead of a lot of other people. I
No
mean,
question.
it suggests he should be in lineups, right?
You're
I mean,
right.
And you're chasing volume, 70% of the carries, as you mentioned, 11% of the targets. That's sufficient as long as his efficiency is below average and just not horrendous as it's been. And again, he's getting the goal line work, which is a
Yeah.
good sign. So
The goal
there's-
line work is encouraging. I just, it's just so weird. It's just like, how often does a player go from being incredibly ineffective from an explosive plays department to all of a sudden just flipping the switch and becoming a big play running back? We've seen it before from Melvin Gordon, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised. I think right now I'm just fatigued by it. I'm fatigued by expecting big things from Melvin Gordon and then seeing another 2.8 yards per carry effort or something like that at the end of the game on Sunday.
Yeah, well, maybe this is an opportunity. They're playing the Packers, who, believe it or not, are allowing the 8th most fantasy points to running backs this
Interesting.
season. They're allowing 4.9 yards per carry. That's second worst. 15 carries inside the 5, second most. 8 rushing touchdowns is third most, and 879 rushing yards allowed is 7th most. So a lot of volume against them and efficiency against them. Maybe Gordon and Eckler kind of get it going this week.
I bet there are people that drafted Melvin Gordon, obviously did not use him up until he returned, but when he did return, thought, hey, I can use Melvin Gordon, right? He's my guy. And yet at some point, they also added Jamaal Williams on the waiver wire. And if they had the choice between those two players right now, they would actually play Jamaal Williams, which he's lower in all of our ranks, to be clear. But, Mike, if you look at an offense that's actually clicking, it's the Packers. And the involvement of the running backs in the passing game of late is ridiculous. Is Jamaal Williams, we had this conversation a bit, is it Monday? Like, he might be a staple of your flex spot now.
See, he's just one of them guys that I have trouble with, like Chase Edmonds and there's been other
Look at
ones.
his hater, Stephania.
It's just like guys that
That's
are
like how he
playing.
says one of them guys.
Yeah.
When you're
guys.
playing, when you're running back playing 25-30% of the snaps, it's just hard for me to say I feel great about putting him in my top 20 or top 20. I have him 34 this week. You're at 28, so we're not that far off. Like, obviously, there's some concern there. He's only handled 26% of the carries, 8% of the targets. He has 5 touchdowns. Yes, you like that. But his expected total is 2.1. He's way above his head in that department. He scored a touchdown on 18.2% of his targets.
Which
That's
is
nowhere near sustainable. Nowhere
if
near
not
something
for
to keep
Aaron
up.
Jones' ridiculousness, then we might be talking about that more, right?
Yeah, but we'd still be talking about the fact that he's not going to keep this up. And I would apply that to Aaron Jones too. I mean, his touchdowns are out of control. Even though he's getting more work near the goal line, and you like that, his touchdown, he's way over his head in that department. And Jones has out-touched him in back-to-back games. So there was a point earlier this year where you kind of saw Williams kind of, just sniping him on touch after touch, and we were really getting frustrated. That hasn't happened over the past 2 weeks. He's been involved, but Jones has been the lead guy.
I feel like there's always one guy each year who just completely obliterates what regression tells us is supposed to happen with touchdowns. A couple of years ago, it was Todd Gurley. Last year, it was Eric Ebron. Maybe these two Packer running backs are just the guys that just buck trends for the entire season.
Sort of, but you don't want to bet on that, though, because almost everyone else will not.
Maybe
almost
I do.
everyone
Fine,
else
maybe
will.
I will, Mike.
You can if you want.
Maybe Stephania and I will.
You can. By the way, Todd Gurley has been getting an enormous amount of work at the goal line the past 2 years, so he was a little over his head, but not by that much, right? Where Aaron Jones and Jamaal Williams, not so much. They're scoring from far out, and those guys are it's almost impossible for them to keep it up. And you can apply that to Eric Ebron too, who was one of the most targeted players in the end zone. I think he led the NFL in end zone targets.
I remember there was a brief scare this week when Aaron Jones left the game because of a shoulder injury, and Aaron Jones feels to me there's a couple things that have happened. He had the hamstring before the start of last season, had a knee injury that cost him a few games. Like, he's going to get dinged up, and there's always the thing with Jamaal Williams, at least performing as well as he has, is I feel like if there's anything that happens to Aaron Jones, like he skyrockets. Like, he's totally
No question.
And this is a good matchup for him this week. I think he has got opportunity too against the Chargers.
I think the most important part about the running backs right now in Green Bay is that until Devontae Adams returns, and we don't know, it's only Wednesday, we'll see whether or not he actually practices today in a more complete capacity relative to where he's been in recent weeks, is that they can't get anything out of their wide receivers right now.
Yeah.
The running backs are the only part of the offense they can trust.
Yeah, and you're seeing the target share go up with Adams, no doubt about it. By the way, I just want to add this in on the matchup this week against the Chargers, and we mentioned this last week. It is a good matchup right now because they are really beat up there. Ingram was out, obviously, he's back, but their 2 top defensive tackles are out too. They've allowed 34-plus fantasy points to running backs 3 of the past 4 weeks, so they're getting hammered by that position.
Yep, rough go of it for the Chargers of late. All right, Devin Singletary has been slow rolled back into this Buffalo offense. And Stephania, people are saying, wait, but he's healthy, right? So do you attribute this to, do you think this is just the Bills being cautious and a continued trust in Frank Gore? There's no lingering effects that we're aware of, right?
I don't think so. We had this
hamstring.
conversation going into the game that we thought, did we trust that Devin Singletary, like were we expecting that he would have a better showing this week when he was one more week removed from the hamstring injury? Because you got to remember, he was out a month. And so, something fell behind me. Ignore the thing that's
that was a
falling.
ghost. Tomorrow's Halloween. A ghost just knocked some stuff over.
Some ghost behind me. But yeah, the ghost threw me off. Anyway, we were wondering if we were going to see a bump up in terms of what Devin Singletary did. And I think we were. You're looking at me funny.
No, I'm engaged by your thoughts here.
No. But I think that now it's like unleash him. You know what I mean? Like, I think they were probably being cautious. I think there's a reason they held him out as long as they did, because they were being cautious.
Mike, you think it's the same thing there?
I think there's a few things to consider here. I mean, he played a lot of snaps. He easily outsnapped Gore 39-17, but he only, in this past game, he had 3 carries and 6 targets. He's ran a route on 79 of 124 snaps. So they really are trying to deploy him how we thought they would in the preseason as their, say, Tariq Cohen or Darren Sproles is like a pass catcher, but that might limit his carry total going forward, especially with Gore in the picture. In fact, if you look at their 4 games together, Devin has outsnapped Gore by 21, but has 30 fewer carries. He's averaging 8.6 yards per carry, so maybe they should hand him the ball a little bit more often.
Is that going to regress or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
It definitely
Sure
will.
about
But
that?
nonetheless, it's still a good effectiveness. You want to get the ball in a guy like that's hands. But he does also have 3 top 25 fantasy weeks in 4 games, which is nice. And he does have a good matchup. So if you're considering him for your flex, considering they're playing Washington this week, 5th most fantasy points to running backs, 30-plus fantasy points allowed to backs in 4 of their past 5 games. They've actually faced 269 running back touches. That is most in the NFL.
So what you just said about the snaps and the way he's being used and the way that he has sort of become the passing down back for Buffalo, I'll be very interested if this game goes as I think many expect it to. Vegas, in particular, has the Bills as a 9.5-point favorite. It might suggest that, hey, they're going to run the football effectively or they're going to be up big against the Redskins, which would lead them to run the football more. And if they are running the football a ton, does that snap count share end up being closer to 50-50, if not in Frank Gore's favor?
Frank Gore more.
You might learn something.
To slow the game down.
Yeah, it could be instructive based off how this game plays out on Sunday. If they do, in fact, handle their business. Now, some might retort and say, the Bills just got walloped by the Eagles, and they got all they could handle from the Dolphins 2 weeks ago. So perhaps this game will be closer than the bettors currently believe. I don't know if we're sort of setting this up for a board bet or not, but there is some potential here to kind of have a rankings flipped here. John Brown checks in at 29 for me. Mike and Stephania have him at 21, 25, respectively. Meanwhile, I've got Michael Gallup at 22. You guys have him at 29 and 28, respectively. So if you're going to make the case for John Brown here, Mike, what might be the case for Smokey Brown? I know he's been consistent, but is the upside that significant?
I think so, with the target share he gets and the way he's utilized. I mean, he's wide receiver 21 so far this season. I have him ranked 21st, somewhat of a coincidence, but I guess it makes some sense. 2 top 10 weeks already. He's been a little bit boom bust, but he does have 10 plus. Maybe I shouldn't say he's boom bust. He's 10 plus fantasy points every week. So he's giving you a pretty decent floor. His average depth of target is 13.9, which is kind of high, but he's got 72% of his targets, which immediately popped into my head like poor man's Tyler Lockett, right? Like just getting the ball downfield and still catching a high rate. You like that for sure. 24% target share this season, playing a career high 87% of the snaps, and good matchup here against Washington, allowing actually it seemed, you know what, actually let me readjust that, because if you look at weeks 1 through 3, they allowed 55 fantasy points per game to receivers, which is a huge number. Since then, it's only 25 per game. So they've actually kind of cracked down a little bit.
Is that a function of how the game's been played against Washington?
Well, and we would expect that to be the case this week, right? They've only faced 129 wide receiver targets. That's 3rd fewest.
Right.
So the efficiency's been bad. The volume's been low. If, as we just talked about, the Bills are able to run the football a lot in this game, maybe that does hurt Brown. So that's one slight negative over the past month or so. But I think overall, with the target share, kind of like Emmanuel Sanders.
He's 5 catches in 4 straight games. I feel like you could see Brown early, and he'll prove his value there, and then you might see it shift to more of a run-heavy game.
Redskins context on those wide receiver points allowed. Last week, it was just Stephon Diggs, no Adam Thielen. Week prior to that, it was the Mud Bowl in D.C.
Right,
against the
that was-
49ers, 9-0. So there have been some games that things haven't necessarily been in the favor of their opponents, even bother throwing the football. So Michael Gallup on the other side, the guy that I am more interested. I feel kind of bold about this one here. The Giants have allowed a player to go over 105 receiving yards 6 times this season. One of those players was Michael Gallup, 7 for 158 all the way back in week 1. When he gets 5 or more targets this season, Michael Gallup is averaging 17.2 fantasy points per game this season. I am just buying into the idea that Michael Gallup now should be close to fully healthy. And I know that he has been back on the field since that surgery, but they have their bye week. You'd imagine that a guy who had surgery like a month ago or a month and a half ago probably could use a few extra days of rest. And Mike, the reason why I was asking you whether I think that the ceiling is not that high on John Brown. I get it where he is for the total of the season, but he has no more than 75 receiving yards in 5 of his past 6 games. He hasn't had a 30-yard catch since week 1. Like, this is a player that's known for his explosiveness. I think maybe that's what Michael Gallup could be. So I'm thinking maybe Michael Gallup has the edge here. And should I wager myself a board bet here? Michael Gallup versus John Brown. Should I do it?
I'll tell you what, Fields, you only live once, and let me tell you.
You only live once.
YOLO.
You know something? What a good idea. So I say, if you guys are interested in taking this bet, one or both of you, I say Michael Gallup outscores John Brown in week 9.
I say John Brown outscores Michael Gallup in week 9.
Put it on the board.
Put it on the board.
That was a little slow because I thought you were going to say it too. I thought you were part of the board bet.
And I was so proud of you for getting it right there. So I just thought I'd chime in with the put it on the board.
Stephania, you're in? Are you in or no?
Oh, but she didn't say it. I don't think
I said put it on the board.
I know, but you didn't say the thing.
I could see where it was going.
You
I
threw Mike off.
read the room. That's the difference.
Yeah, but Mike was waiting for you to say a thing, which is why he didn't do it. That one's not on you, Mike. I would like to make that.
I did like Kyle's comment here on the screen. Kyle says that Mike is on tape delay.
Well, you know what? I'm a yeah. All right.
Kyle with a funny.
All right.
7-second buffer.
It's
we love
true.
you still, Mike.
It's true. But I was no, I have an excuse on this one.
Right.
Daniel's with me. Look, if Daniel agrees with me on something, then I'm right.
It's only because you two are bowling on the same team.
Yeah, so you're bowling buddies.
All of a sudden,
we were bowling buddies last year. What are you talking about?
Daniel knows enough. You don't cross prison, Mike. Everybody knows
That's
that.
right.
It's one of the most established things in the entire history.
You don't want to be on the wrong end of one of those spreadsheets. I'll tell you what.
That's right. No, you don't. I'll take it down with numbers.
With those stats.
Before we get to a few social questions via Keith, Stephania is going to tell us about SeatGeek.
I am, Field.
Thank you.
Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult
all the time?
Purpose?
I hate it
all the time.
Yep.
It's as if they're so big they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. With millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee, SeatGeek proves there is a better way. Search sports, live music, comedy, and more. SeatGeek has the tickets you're looking for all in one place. A quick look at the App Store shows over 50,000 5-star reviews. How's that for customer satisfaction? SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web. Then it rates each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. Finally, SeatGeek displays them on an interactive seat map. SeatGeek breaks down the details. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced. And every purchase is fully guaranteed so you can shop for tickets with confidence. SeatGeek will even give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app today and use promo code FFF for $10 off on your first purchase. That's promo code FFF for $10 off on your first purchase.
Not cool, Keith. Not cool, Keith. Not cool, Keith. Let's rock.
Never not great there. Keith, tell us about the social questions du jour.
Yeah, I got a handful of them here today. Flo wants to know better stash. And this is not Gardner Minshew, by the way. A better stash for the rest of the season. Kenny Stills, Chris Conley, Mecole Hardman, or Preston Williams.
I'm going to do process of elimination here. I'm going to cross off Chris Conley first.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to cross off Mecole Hardman second.
Yep.
And then I'm going to cross off Preston Williams third and land on Kenny Stills.
I land on Kenny Stills because of short term, right? I think once Will Fuller comes back, he might have a hard time being consistent. I might like Preston Williams a little bit more, but Stills is the guy I want now. As long as Fuller's out, he should be at least in in your flex, maybe wide receiver 3 spot. I know he kind of disappointed last week, but you're going to have that with a lot of players. So Stills is still in a good position in that offense.
Yeah, when's the Texans bye week? It's coming
I will tell you, it is in, I can't find it.
Okay.
Week 10.
It is week 10. So I was under the impression that Will Fuller would be out through the bye week and maybe a week beyond. So that means you get a week of really good week, another week of solo Kenny Stills, and maybe a week after that. But if you need the value now, he's certain they like him a lot down there. They really do.
More hard-hitting questions here. Twisty wants to know, what is your favorite flavor of jam?
That's so easy. It's apricot.
Really? Interesting.
What?
Quick answer.
Such an eccentric.
I know.
quick answer.
What is not eccentric?
Apricot.
What's apricot? What's
Hey, my great-grandma called. She wants her
boysenberry.
jam back, Stefania.
Well, what? Did you say boysenberry?
Yeah, I was just being funny.
No,
you said
because that's
apricot.
actually a really good flavor.
Is
Jam.
it?
Oh, my gosh. You're not helping yourself here, Stefania. Come on.
No, listen. We had an apricot tree growing up. Apricot, whatever. We had a tree in our backyard growing up in California, as you're fortunate enough to do. We have a lot of fruit trees. My mom made apricot jam every year. So it's like one of those childhood memories. My favorite. Really good. What's the problem? Why is that an issue? Why are you making fun of me?
Mike, you have an answer? You have a...
I would. Kyle just wrote strawberry. I'm surprised he knows that like jam is a thing. Like, do you eat that?
NBA jam, right?
NBA
Stop
jam. What do you got?
NBA jam's a good one. Strawberry jam.
Daniel, how about you?
Agreed, strawberry.
Strawberry, yeah. I'd probably say, like, for all purposes, strawberry, but every once in a while, and I know that a lot of people don't like grape. Every once in a while,
Yeah, I
can
get
get
grape too. Yeah, I was going to say grape. It has to be one of
Grape
the
is a
two.
jelly. Yeah, grape is a jelly,
sorry,
not a jam.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Strawberry
There's no
jam
difference.
then.
When I like to get crazy, I like blackberry because it's a little bit of a, like a
Blackberry
bad
and
boy jam.
boysenberry are pretty close.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
I just want you guys both to know that Jackson just said, "What's an apricot look like back here?" And I'm really disappointed in him.
Wait.
I legitimately don't think he knows what an apricot looks
You know
like.
what?
Don't worry, Jackson. It's okay.
Oh, he just Googled it. Don't worry. We got to figure it out now.
Listen, there's
Okay.
no apricot propel, so I don't know what it is. Like all these other color, grape, strawberry, blackberry, they're all propel.
Strawberry. I
and
feel
that's all
like
I
you
drink.
guys never got you didn't have much jam experience.
Oh, sorry we didn't grow up with an apricot tree in our backyard, Stefania. Heaven forbid.
I mean, I didn't grow up with
You know what?
strawberry
I bet you
bushes
else
either,
you never
but-
had that my mom used to make fig jam. So good.
That actually is
You
good.
guys are
Did you like
there's
fig?
no
Did you like
response.
fig Newtons?
I love
Fig Newtons.
Fig Newtons
too.
is so dope.
That was kind of a love-hate.
Fun
thing
fact,
with,
my
fig
dad
Newtons.
called me Newt when I was a kid because I ate them all the time.
Wait,
Newt?
what?
Whoa!
What did
Fun
we
fact.
just learn?
New thing just happened.
Mom called him
Okay.
Prison Mike. His
Let's go
dad
back
called him
to- yeah.
Newt as a kid.
Yeah, let's go back to prison, Mike. Go with that one. What have I done?
Hey,
I
Newt
love it.
Clay. Prison Newt.
Oh my gosh, this is exactly what everyone was. This is what everybody came for today. I'm sure.
So they call me in the clink, Newt.
Oh my gosh.
That was the code. That
Yeah.
was if you're on the inside.
Yeah.
You knew
that will
what
be
it
on a
was.
future drop somewhere.
Okay. Did you use your money that you earned in prison, Mike, to buy Fig Newtons?
I did.
Instead of
I did.
cigarettes?
At commissary, that's what I went. And got Fig Newton.
Mike knows a lot about prison.
He really does. I think we
I learned-
unfortunately stumbled upon
I learned
something.
everything I know about prison from Orange is the New Black. So I think
Sure.
and Michael Scott.
All right, Keith. What
Okay.
else?
Cozy wants to know: can I get Dave Johnson rest of season name game?
Oh,
I'm having
boy.
a hard time here.
Was it a Donson? We just got a Donson?
Yeah.
David Johnson name game for the rest of the season. Daniel, put the drop.
You know when you grow up and you have a name?
Sure. Field is playing with his own spicy tomato.
I mean,
I just don't want to touch it.
Why do you hate Devontae Freeman?
Why do you hate Aaron Rodgers?
I don't want to leave before we talk about Golden Tate.
so many names to choose from.
Field brought up Boner,
But when I squeeze it, nothing happens.
and then Mike Clay brought up Boner.
Now a groin issue. We don't know where that is.
You don't know where the groin is? What's with Ted Ginn? I'm just
Why can't
warning
you just tap it?
Because Carson Palmer sucks.
I'm an attractive human.
Oh, you are. You are. You're very attractive.
This is
He's
getting
right.
creepy all of a sudden.
Put your shirt on and tell me some fantasy advice.
Matthew Berry, you're a son of a.
It's a family show. That's a good one.
That is a good
All
one.
right, I'll give you the names.
Who
You
brought
have the
us that
option.
name drop?
Of course, the one and
The
only
one
Lee
and only.
Martin.
Here we go.
By the way, is the assumption here that he's coming back after
No,
next week?
the
or-
assumption is that
we don't know.
you just,
Okay, that's
you have
good.
to do it
All
right
right,
now.
that's fair.
That's the point of the game. Mike.
Okay.
David
All right.
Johnson or Marlon Mack?
David Johnson.
Johnson, yeah.
David Johnson or Tevin Coleman?
See, that's where it gets tough.
Okay,
I'm
now
really-
I can't be objective because, of
Mhm.
course, I'm going to say Tevin Coleman.
You know,
But-
I have, especially the Johnson missing a game here, projected to miss one more. Actually, Coleman
Tevin
ahead.
Coleman.
I have Coleman ahead. Yeah.
Okay, Chris Carson or David Johnson?
David Johnson.
I'm going to go Carson.
Yeah,
He's a
same
ton of
here.
volume there.
Aaron Jones or David Johnson?
David Johnson.
I'm going Jones.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I go Aaron Jones.
Touchdowns
as well.
will come down, but I think he's just too good. The offense is too good. He's the lead back.
Okay.
I'd go with him.
How's it feel to be wrong? Okay.
And David Johnson or Nick Chubb?
Chubb.
Chubb.
Even with Kareem Hunt's back after this week.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, but I still think he's good enough.
Yeah,
David
it's gonna take a while.
Johnson or Josh Jacobs?
I'm going to go Jacobs. He's been really effective with a lot of volume. I wish he saw more
I'm a little
targets.
worried about him because he's been so close. I mean, he's banged up pretty good. But
So is Johnson, too. That's why I
I
broke that tie.
know. Fine, Josh Jacobs.
All right, one more here. Two more here. David Johnson or Devontae Freeman?
David Johnson.
I'll go Johnson on that one.
Okay, last one here. I don't have any disagreement, by the way. David Johnson or Mark Ingram? Kind of an interesting one.
I'll go Johnson.
Yeah,
not
but
enough
Johnson.
target. Yeah, not enough targets for Ingram. Yeah.
Sledding gets more difficult for Baltimore. There are actually a lot of teams, the Patriots, the 49ers, I think the Ravens as well, whose schedule sees a decided uptick in the second half relative to where it was competition-wise in the first half. Keith?
Mike brought up Kareem Hunt's pending return. Justin wants to know, better stash, Darius Geis or Kareem Hunt?
I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt, which probably is going to be a disagreement from...
I actually am going to agree with you on that.
I'm nervous about... I said this on the show on Monday. I'm nervous about Tuesday. I'm nervous about Darius Geis. Like, first of all...
For a number of reasons.
He can return in Week 11. Doesn't mean he has to return in Week 11. Also, like, this team isn't very good.
Nope.
They don't run the football effectively.
Mm-hmm.
He's a health risk.
Yeah.
And as much as I think there's a chance Darius Geis is a good player, like, the body of evidence he's like an amazing talent is really small.
Yeah, and he could come back and just share the backfield with AP the rest of the season,
Yeah,
right? So
and Chris
it's
Thompson.
possible.
Yeah.
My instinct right away was Hunt, and then I started thinking about it, and then you start thinking, volume, right? Like there's a chance Geis could be a 15 to 20 touch sort of player. It's possible, at least even with Peterson in the backfield for now. Whereas Hunt, if Nick Chubb is healthy, he does not have a path to a full-time role. He'll probably be a 30% snap sort of player. So this is a really tough call. You have more conviction, so maybe we should lean your direction, but my instinct says I'd rather have Geis on my bench right now.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean,
my thought process.
Kareem Hunt right now in fantasy football actually kind of reminds me of, the NBA teams have a future draft pick and they hoard it. The Celtics did this forever, right? They had all these Nets picks, and you'd always talk about trade possibilities, and it was like the Nets pick going forward. And it's like, that Nets pick could become Zion Williamson if the ping pong ball's bouncing your favor, or it could become like an average lottery pick that's not very good, right? The Kareem Hunt thing is like, hey, listen, Kareem Hunt, if something happens to Nick Chubb, would be a top 5 running back, right? We know in terms of talent that he is capable of being that. He also might come back and he might get 8 carries a game, and that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So the value of Kareem Hunt right now actually might be at an apex from a trade standpoint, because someone might offer you what could be, even not an RB1, but someone might offer you someone you could start every single week, and that might be more than what you get out of Kareem Hunt starting next week and for the rest of the season.
Yeah, if you're stashing Hunt, you might want to go talk to the Nick Chubb owner the person who has Chubb on their roster. So just to see what they have. Maybe you can get some good receiver or something like that.
All right. What else, Keith?
Yeah, last one here from Steve. He says his team is looking good and he's trying to get a jump on the competition. Any streamer defenses that you like for the final month this season?
Mike, I get the sense that you actually took the time to look at whose schedules are favorable in the last month of the season.
I did.
Okay.
I did. That's what I was doing in a pre-show meeting. You were snacking or something. I don't know what you were doing. So.
Tweeting, yeah.
You were tweeting, yeah. I was.
At Field Yates.
I was looking at these defenses. So I was just scanning through the opponents, and 3 popped out almost right in line alphabetically. The Lions have Minnesota, Tampa Bay, and Denver. So maybe you don't want to use them against Minnesota, but Tampa Bay and Denver could be possibilities. The Packers, they play Washington, Chicago, and at Minnesota.
Like those.
And then Houston is Denver, and we don't even know who their quarterback's going to be. It could be Brandon Allen, Drew Lock, who knows. Tennessee and Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Tampa Bay scores points, but they turn it over a lot, obviously.
Right.
So
Detroit, Green Bay, and Houston.
Pointer defense.
Detroit, Green Bay, Houston.
I always like looking for turnovers because those points don't disappear on you.
All right, 3 names to consider. I think it's hard to stash somebody for, several weeks if you're not going to use them until weeks 14, 15, 16, and 17. But maybe as we get to the turn of week 12, when bye weeks are over, week 13, and your roster is kind of set, get a jump by adding either the Lions, the Packers, or the Texans. On Thursday, we're going to preview the Thursday night game between the Cardinals and the... Who are they playing again?
Oh, yeah. my San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, that's right. The 7-0 San Francisco 49ers. A great challenge for Kyler Murray. We'll have practice updates, and we have a word from Daniel before we go anywhere.
Not only that, but we are all going to dress up on the podcast for tomorrow.
Sure.
So,
I
like, if
can't
you have
let it be
never,
a surprise.
okay, calm down, because if people have never watched the video, this is the show to tune in for, Stephania. That's called a tease. Welcome
Follow
to the business.
At Fantasy Focus on Twitter to see the live stream, or the ESPN YouTube channel, the ESPN app, the ESPN Fantasy page on Facebook. So many ways to watch us. We look forward to it. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Peace out.
If you need a stick of Tide, Field is your guide. If you're in Bristol or in Farmington, you should find another ride. Candidly, he hates Mike Clay, and you know that it's a fact. Every Yater's gonna Yate, 'cause he's on TV.